times already.
No, you know what that is? I have a different diet. This is actually I actually bought something called a nutter so I can make my own plant milk.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I've been doing my own plant milks and changing my diet a lot.
Nice. Plant milk.
Yeah. So you got the cashew milk, you have the hazelnut milk, you have the macadamia milk, you have almond milk. Those are what you call the plant milks.
Then you can make your own.
I can make my own now.
Dope.
All right. Well, good night, folks. You hear these guys talking about making, look, they're innovative here at Fatherhood Talks, making their own milk. Making their own milk. But guess what? That's the sign of a father and what a leader of a family will do, find ways to innovatively do things to provide for their families. I want to welcome everybody here tonight to Fatherhood Talks. This is the Fatherhood Think Tank, where we think about topics that affects fathers, the family, and the community. Tonight we have a very interesting topic. I think I don't think, but I know that it is one that is probably one of the most powerful as I think about statements to think about being able to pick your battles. In our little picture for the night say, pick your battles, pick your battles. You don't have to show up to every argument that you're invited to. And I think that, that's just one part of this. But I think that when we're thinking about as fathers picking our battles, we're looking at the idea of what do we stand on, what do we don't stand on, and really how do we really, show this learned behavior to our children and sometimes to our partners. Because many times we will pretend as if what we do is a man on an island, but most of the time in the structure we have, people, if they see you as the leader, they follow what you do and they do it just like you do it. So you have to be mindful of that. Again, good night. Welcome to Fatherhood Talks. I'm Ron Osborne Williams. Let's hear who fathers are in the room tonight to talk about this topic, picking your battles.
Good evening, everybody. Gene Rout Menard, father of 2 young adults.
Good evening. John Ramirez, father of a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Good evening. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Larry. Go ahead.
Good evening. Larry Jordan, father of 2, grandfather of 1. I decided to change my nickname to distinguish myself from Elder Thomas. So I'm renaming myself OG Triple OG.
Okay.
And Elder Thomas let you go first.
Okay, Elder Thomas Alberry.
President Adams, father of 3 and 1 grandchild.
Hey, good evening, gentlemen. My name is Lionel Lightborn. I'm a father.
Go ahead. I'll do it later.
Okay, I'm sorry. Lionel Lightborn, father to a tribe of 7, 4 young men, 3 young women, and 1 granddaughter.
Okay. Yeah. Elder Thomas Alberry, a father of 2 adults and grandfather of 7, 2 boys and 5 girls. Welcome.
Oh, Travis, you came right on. You could have did your introduction.
Oh, how y'all doing? Travis, father of 6, 18 all the way down to 10. How y'all doing?
It's funny, Travis, every year that number at the bottom keep getting higher, right?
Yeah, it does.
And I think we have just another person in the room. That's probably Jay. He's just probably
Yes,
back.
I'm Justin, father of 5 and 1 on the way. I have a 11-year-old boy, and then I have an 8-year-old daughter, a soon to be 3, a soon to be 2-year-old daughter, a 1-year-old daughter, and yeah, one on the way. Glad to be here with you, gentlemen.
Congratulations, David.
Great, great, fantastic.
Congratulations.
So, this topic, picking your battle, it really, I'm gonna say this, this wasn't in the rotation. I put it in the rotation for the day. There was something else in the rotation, and I just booted it and put this in the rotation for the day. Because I think it was, I thought, it was something good to talk about, to learn how to really pick our battles. I'll start this conversation off with a reflection of having an argument with someone about my child, and how I'm going about my engagement with my child. I think that's the best thing to say. And I was explaining to them how I was doing it, and they were saying that maybe they was explaining to me that I should, as we sometimes say here, you should fight a little bit more. You should do more fighting. And I was saying, well, I'm not going to fight. I'm going to advocate. And I'm going to use the resources I need to advocate, because you can't understand why fighting is bad, because you see fighting as good. And so and it's really got very tense and into a thing. And I just said, you know what, you're right. But you're right about what you're saying, about what I should do, but you're not me. So I can't do what you would do. And I think that it's just a fair statement of knowing that, some battles, I think many times people don't understand that there's some battles that you just have to wait and not fight so you can maybe win the war. And I know sometimes people don't, and sometimes the war ain't about war, sometimes it's about peace. And in that whole conversation I was having with the person, that was my issue, is that anything I want to do it in peace. I don't want my blood pressure high. I don't want to risk my career, my anything. I don't look at what happened to this guy in whatever city. He was arguing with this lady and she shot him. She shot him dead, right? Live on live. Are these guys, there's another story, I live these stories, I watch these stories all the time. A guy who was mad, who got out of jail and killed the whole, basically killed everybody in their family, except his child, because he was arrested for some domestic thing, and he got out and did all this to the people. Those kind of things are I think when we think about it, this is not picking the right battle. And feeling like I got to fight every battle that comes. And you don't have to fight every battle that comes, because if you're comfortable, and I think when you know what your plan is and what your mission is and what you want to do and how you want to do it, it's a little bit different than, just going out here as I would, ad hoc and saying, I'm going to do something ad hoc. I'm going to just do willy-nilly whatever I want to do because I need to get something said or something done or something proven to somebody. When sometimes, as I say all the time, you can get a lot more flies with that honey than with that feces. And so that's one of the points of looking at this, as I look at it, this topic of being able to pick your battles and know when to kind of like take things on and when not. And I think it's important for us, especially as Black and brown men, to think about that, because a lot of times, and I had a good talk with my friend this weekend, and we were talking about the idea of the concealed weapons, that anybody can have a concealed weapon, but then also open carry law. And we had this conversation about the idea of how comfortable me and him would feel about going places open carrying. Even though we have the right to do so and we have the ability, how comfortable would we feel to know that someone could, interpret our Black and brownness as aggression and then say, we also had a gun out. So it's just, the little things to think about, realizing what battles that you want to pick and want to take. So I throw it to the crowd, to the group. You know, what are we thinking about this idea of picking our battles? How, and we might, somebody might be thinking about picking battles in a completely different way than I just presented. So that's another part that I can't wait to hear.
You know, what you're saying, the picking the battles, I agree with you when you say that every battle is not something that you need to be a part of. Now, the thing with that is not everything is a battle. And I think that's another thing that you have to be aware of. Sometimes what you think is a battle should be the time you should be listening and understanding where the other person is coming from. And sometimes we're so quick to get on the defensive that it becomes a battle when it should be a time of learning and educating yourself. So I think when it comes to picking those battles, be mindful of what it is that you're, for lack of a better word, what you're destroying by not being able to step back and be more decisive on your maneuvers within the conversation.
I think Ron also alluded to something when he used that word advocating. And you're right. I had that problem myself. I was talking about for years. And I had to realize, I'm like, number one, we was fighting two different battles anyway. Because the average person I would get into conversations with or arguments with, I realized they were arguing while I was advocating. And so when the discussion is over for them, it's over. But for me, it's never over. And so I'm always thinking different strategies and ways and philosophies on how I would have attacked that subject for next discussion. You understand? And because I've been conditioned myself for that so long, I'm like, Lionel, you thought you put yourself in arguments, but you really wasn't argument because your outcome at the end of the discussion determines whether you're arguing or advocating. That's the difference. And so what is your outcome? What is your whole purpose for even having this discussion? But then again, I had to grow to this because, and I can't take away somebody's right to grow, right? And because of that, and my wife and I had to learn this is what makes us a closer, a more efficient couple, that we had to first learn how to fight with each other before we had to learn how to fight for each other. That's the difference between picking your battle. And so, yes, I think it's a lot of battles worth having, and particularly if you care about a particular person, place, thing, or idea. It's not limited to one or the other, but unlimited to those four things and those four areas of life. So if you're passionate about something, it's worth having a battle about, because you have to change your mindset, particularly if you heard somebody with a selfish outcome or a selfish outlook. You understand? And change only stop with their change. You understand? And I even had close friends where we was at the point of severing that friendship, but I had to have that particular discussion where they call it courageous conversation or whatever we call it. But we had to have that conversation that I'm like, listen, if you're thinking that way, you understand? That can potentially causes our friendship. Why? Is because I need you to go a little further. I need you to think beyond yourself. I need you to think beyond your yard. You understand? Because this is the type of friend you have. And guess what? That's important to me. You understand? And if you can't do that, particularly being a blessed person, you understand? I'm like, it's not your right to do it. It's your duty. You understand? And not to mention, I guess the whole argument was about me telling him, and this is the thing about having an argument, because what I was really trying to convey to him is, I need your help. Whether you scared to help me, whether you just don't want to help me, if you're going to be my friend, I need you to be more of a friend. And this is how you can be more of a friend. You understand? And so I don't just believe in having arguments. I don't want to have friends who just don't have arguments. If your argument don't advocate, then it's going to be a wasted conversation.
You know, I think, especially in terms of picking your battles, a lot of people, that's the way they communicate. And that's their form of, that's their personality type. in many cases, and they go around looking for fights, you know, and it's important. I know some people that are close to me, that's the way they are. And it took me the longest time to figure out what in the heck is wrong with them, you know. But, and then it just occurred to me that that's the way that they communicate. Unfortunately, that method of communication doesn't lend itself to a lot of friends, and the friends that they do have really understand that that's how they are. They say, "Oh, that's just how they are," you know. But you know, and I think in those particular cases, when I just choose not to battle, like the old saying that said, "It takes two to tango," you know, I just choose not to be involved in that. I'm like, nah, we're not doing that today. I'm not even going to, you know, entertain this. And then I'll either walk away or I will just try to change the subject.
What comes to my thoughts is, if you see two people arguing, who's right, who's wrong? All we see is the two, right? And it's always the perspective, right? It's always the outside looking into, right? What Triple OG was talking about, how you engage because that's how people engage, right? But why are we really arguing? Are we arguing because we want to be right, or are we arguing because we want to prove a point, right? Like, what's your desired outcome? Going back to what Lightborn was saying, I kind of want to redirect the conversation a little bit back to what Ra was saying. I remember when I was in school in Nebraska, and in Nebraska it was open carry, right? And these white boys would go to Walmart, full ARs on their back, hunting rifles, and just because that was the law, you're okay with that. You can walk around with your piece showing. You can walk around with whatever you had because that's the law. But the law is treated a little different if you're a person of color and you show up with your gun like that, right? Even though it's the law, now it's like, why are you walking in the Walmart with the AR? Because I can. Well, do you really need to walk into the store? Well, why are you stopping me, officer, but you let him go in there? And somebody's walking out with their AR on their back, right? So it's when you talk about going back to picking your battles or your arguments, I'm arguing for my ability to have the same right as someone else in a sense, but really the rights are not there. It's I want to say it's a false reality, right? What's good for the goose isn't good for the gander. It is not all the way across the board. So I say all that because sometimes these battles, we don't pick them, but we also don't need to walk away from them. And our ego needs to be in, like, that's where the shadow and the ego comes in, right? Like, fuck all that. Why you let him do it? You coming at me? You know what I mean? Like, I have just the same. I have my permit. I have my rules just as much as he does. But because I'm Latino and I look a little Mexican, now you're gonna come at me crazy, right? Like, nah. When you sit back and you look at the whole spectrum of things, that's how the rules are made. Right. So when do you choose to argue? When do you choose not to argue?
Yeah, and you make a very good point, John, because I've watched quite a few videos recently. And as you know, as a content, as this being this content making, you got to watch a lot of content. And I see that there is this thing that occurs for our kids. I mean, I think for our kids, for our women, that they will immediately advocate for themselves and they will not, how do I say, where the professionals should de-escalate, they will not de-escalate. They will say, I have my rights and this is the right that I should be able to do. And a lot of times I agree with the idea of what is your rights and what's correct, but I also understand that and think about it that in many instances, I'm not going to do that. A lot of times, if I get pulled over, I'm trying to be as correct as possible. I got my driver's license. I got whatever I need. Officer say, hey, let me see your driver's license. I don't ask them for what, because you know why I don't ask them for what? Because I got no reason not to be here where I need to be at and doing what I'm doing. And I don't have, and I found that not to be, you know, because I feel like, hey, I can do this. Say, hey, here's my driver's license, whatever. Now they start going carrying on. Now you're right. We're gonna get into we're probably gonna get into some verbal discourse, because I'm gonna say, well, I gave you my driving license, I gave you my stuff. Now you're telling me it's something else here. You're not operating in good faith. And sometimes it's our language we use. Because clearly I operated in good faith to give you my driving license and tell you where I was going, what I was doing. Now you're doing something else. And I know that, you know, somebody will say, well, you don't have to do that. You shouldn't, you know, you can do what you want. You're right. But I also want to show people around that, guess I got nothing to hide. I got nothing to be ashamed of. And I'm not a criminal. So I'm not going to act. And I'm not saying that people who don't want to be transparent act like criminals, but I'm going to let you know that as this Black man I am, I have nothing to hide. I got 3 guns in the truck.
Let me ask you a question on that, Ron. Do you think that we act different if that scenario was in public versus in private? Right?
It don't matter to me. It don't matter. I mean, because I understand. I think I understand what you're saying is that when everyone is seeing, I think that everyone can feel in some instance of audiences change every situation, even for couples. I see this more for couples than anything else. You know, what a couple with a people in relationships say to each other in private versus what they might say, get my guy, you go get me some goddamn water in private, but in public, what water? Yeah, they might come back and throw the water in your face because it's the public that, you know, you got an audience for something. Where they might just got the water and say, don't talk to me like that when they bring the water back to you in private type of sense. So I think that it's a lot of that. And then we live in a technology world where someone has a camera and listen, I seen a young lady, her mother is a police officer in Chicago. She's here at school, it was a fire and the police wanted to take her phone. They wanted to take her phone and did some things, and she was on the phone with her mother. Her mother was telling her what to do and how to do it. It didn't matter. She still ended up on the floor, wrapped up. But here's the point. She did all that happened to her, but guess what? No charges was found. She was let go 2 hours later. You know, what's gonna happen to those officers who know? But sometimes the question is, do we want to go through that over some civil rights things, I think. And when I say civil rights, I'm not saying our civil rights, but some things that someone feels like they're going to do. Because if they do something wrong, in that instance, I don't got to get bruised and beat it up to still get a lawsuit afterwards. If you do something wrong, you do something wrong. I just don't have to get no bruises and bumps for you doing something wrong to me. So I just think that, you know, that's just my opinion of how I want to be, because I think that I've lived a life of telling the police when I was younger and was against police, maybe even against authority, a young person being against authority. But guess what? I had nobody looking up to me or no one to look and learn from me. So it's that's the difference, you know, because if I do it, I can't expect anybody else who looks and sees me as a leader or even just as they're learning from me to do anything opposite. Because the first thing I'll say is, okay, I don't want to ramble, but just the sample that happened to this brother. This brother, I forget where it was, what city it in. He had worked his way up to become the principal of the school, right? He was in an incident, and this is where we go, where some battles are better left to leave alone. His old lady had a new dude. He went to go confront her and the dude, blah, blah, blah. Nothing happened, but they then pressed charges on him. Then the police had a warrant out for his arrest, all this. Now, 3 months later, The man is announced to be the principal of the new school. When the police go to pick him up? The first day of this new school. 3 months. It's 3 months since that incident happened. The warrant was done 3 months ago. So I say all of these things in some sense. And he didn't know he had a warrant out. Nobody called him and told him he had a warrant. So even you know, it's just, we have to remember that so this was a man who was a behavior specialist working in school. He worked his way up, working with those young men in his school to teach them how to do certain things, this and that. And what did the system do to him? Go and show the kids that even he can get the same thing. So now everything he said could be counterfeited, even though it shouldn't be counterfeited, because if we look at it closer, the real issue was why they didn't call him back, why they could have picked him up. They could have said, hey, turn yourself in, any of those things. But that didn't happen. So this is we have to think about it, and then go all the way back to the original battle. The original battle of going to the girl house with a new boyfriend and getting in an argument and fisticuffs with her. For what reason? Man, let her go, man. It's you know, it's POF, man. POF. Plenty fishes in the sea.
My wife and I was just having this conversation last night. I was telling her, I said, particularly as a man, particularly as a responsible man, I said, I have to understand my entire environment, right? And so every decision I make and every comment I make, I got to make sure that that comment is responsible enough, not only just for me, but everybody around me, right? And that's just in conversation. And so imagine what that looks like in action. So I'm like, and particularly if I'm out with you or if I'm out with anybody else. And so the more people I'm out with, the more people I become responsible for. You understand? Which makes me more responsible in what I say, how I act. And that's only simply because I love them. You understand? And so I wouldn't be as reckless when I'm with others as I probably would be by myself. And so picking your battles for me, then becomes more of a prevention tool, right? Simply because I got to go by the facts around me more than the feelings in me. And so, and now I got to restrain myself. Again, the feelings in me got to restrain itself or concede to the facts around me. And so with that particular outlook, I told her, and being a man, I said, you got to see things from start to finish. You know, and like you, Ron, and probably so many other brothers on here, I done been in situations, so I done had the experiences and the examples of start to finish, what start to finish look like. And start to finish doesn't look like a one-day incident. Start to finish look like, okay, what does this crisis, well, this conversation turn into a crisis? And then what does that crisis look like? And then after the crisis, what does that look like after the crisis? Is there going to be revenge? Am I going to have to get revenge? Are they going to have to get revenge? Or is anybody going to get arrested? Is somebody else going to get arrested? Am I going to have to kill this person? Or is this person going to have to kill me? You understand? See how much thinking? I mean, you have to think that thing out, almost like a television. You know how they show the movies and they show you the start to finish and they go back and show you what might have happened up to this crisis and stuff like that. Same thing with picking your battles. But the only thing, it's real life. It's real. It's not reality TV.
Right.
It's just reality. And so because of that, I have to know that the impact of whatever I do, you got short-term and long-term. And I've had the experience with the long-term where I may have had to go to court for a year until they dropped the charges. And they drove me for a year until they dropped the charges. So even if I had you had a job, you got to take off every month just to go to, what do you call it? A hearing. You understand? I'm showing you how long-term it is. And you got to go to the hearing to see if they're going to take it to trial. You don't want to take a plea deal because you already understand that a plea deal and no whole adjudication, that's just as, matter of fact, you're guilty if you take a plea, point blank. And so if you're going to fight it just to keep your record clean, now they're going to drag you for a year because how dare you, you understand, challenge the system with your innocence, and you're probably innocent, but they don't care about that because how are you going to challenge the system with your innocence? Now it becomes, what does that, or how much do your innocence means to you? And so many, more than 70% of the young men, and particularly young Black and brown men, concede to, guess what? Will trade their innocent for guilt. They could be 100% innocent, and they would trade that 100% innocent for guilt, just not chance it against the system. And that would determine how much that incident and how much you had to say and how much that battle was really worth. I went those lengths. That made it cost me 5 years out of my life. Doesn't mean I went to jail for 5 years, never been convicted of anything, but I fought enough cases, about 5 years worth of cases, to understand that particular perspective, which means I sacrificed for that perspective. So I understand what that battle is. Now, the only difference is God won the war for me, but I had to go through every one of those battles that I chose.
Woo. I wish I had heard this about an hour and a half ago. Dealing with some between my wife and I, which I'm going to have to go back and eat crow and step up and be a man about it, because she is a wonderful person and I love her to death. You know, she's my all in all, and but you know, you go through things and then you sit back and you look at what you were talking about or what you were doing, and then you say to yourself, was that all really necessary? Or could it have been handled a different way? And I said, certainly can, and it will be. So I encourage you as those and who have significant others to, like you said, pick your battles. Thank you.
Yeah, I think when it comes to picking your battles, I know that the way that I normally respond to that, I will try to treat the situation or treat the person and say the way that I want to be treated. And in most cases, that's with respect, you know, so I'm gonna treat them with respect. Now, if they come back with me with disrespect, now, then I've got to make a choice. You know, am I gonna disrespect them because they disrespected me, or am I gonna continue in my behavior? And most of the times I choose not to disrespect, because once you say it, it's out there and you can't take it back. You know, so you just say, well, let me just be quiet and take it easy, and usually the situation will work out. With some people, it's not happening. So you know, I know that's the way I choose to pick my battles. But also what you mentioned earlier, Lionel, you know, the racism is so baked in the institution that people just take it as that's the way it should be. I mean, it's like it's always been that way, you know, so that I guess that's the way it should be. You know, that doesn't make it right, but that's the way it is, you know. But and I think in a lot of those cases, those are the times that you have to fight back. And like you said, you got to say, no, even I'm gonna stand up for my rights. And even if the institution says, well, guess what, we're gonna punish you for standing up with your rights, then you just have to say, well, you know what, I'm just gonna have to take that punishment. You know, in some cases you just gotta do that, you know. But I think when it comes to relationships, relationships are a little bit different, you know, with your significant other, with your kids, you know, you definitely have to pick your battles. I know that my kids, and being grown, you know, you just can't tell them anything. You know, you can tell them, but it's like everything you wrong with everything you say. Oh, you old school, people don't do that way anymore, you know, but truth never changes. Truth is going to be truth, you know, and facts are going to be facts, you know. As much as people try to twist things, truth is going to still stay the truth, you know. And you just hope that in the long run that they find out, and they usually learn in the end, but they still not going to say they're sorry. They'll tell their friends, yeah, I was wrong, I messed up, but you know, they're not gonna tell you. But that's the way I do things.
You know, listen to everybody and me and thinking, I think when you talk about choosing battles, there's a formula to it, right? Is it worth my, is this battle worth my time? Like Lonnie was talking about, is it worth my effort? And is it worth my energy? And those are the type of things that you really need to, I feel, in listening to everybody, that you really need to decide. And I think going back to what Lionel was saying, that was worth his time, effort, and energy, because it meant it was a level of respect that he was going for. And it was from the system and from those who wronged him, right? But if you just, if going back to, and I can't remember who said this, but just argue, I think it was Ramirez who said this, arguing just to argue, right? Is that worth my time, effort, and energy to go to battle with this person every time I see them, right? Sometimes you know, it gets to the point where you just see them and you're like, you just start off the sentence with, "You're right." Don't even come, don't even waste the time. Just tell them that they're right and just keep on moving.
Absolutely.
Because it's draining. You know what I'm saying? And it's, you know, it's sometimes it gets soul sucking, you know, because they're just taking everything out of you where you just like, yo, after some conversations, you walk away feeling like, yo, man, I'm mentally drained on this. And so I think when you are talking about picking and choosing, and like I'll go back even with what Triple OG said. When it comes to the relationship that you have with the person, the requirements are going to change when you're picking those battles. You see what I'm saying? Because you want to remain respectful, but also you don't want to be taken for granted. And I think there's something to be said with that.
I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here because I actually like arguing. So and I don't think that, like, you say, oh, you like to argue. I'm like, no, it's just something in me that just like to argue. It's just the way I was created. And so now the funny part about it is, if I didn't know you, you couldn't get 2 words out of it. That's the strangest part. I've been in my church 26 years, and in 26 years, most people have never heard me talk. That's 26 years. And so if I didn't know you, so chances are I'm arguing with you, chances are I know you, that only means I care about you. And so I'm very selective in number one, who I'm going to talk to anyway, not saying I'm better than anybody, but I'm selective in what I'm going to say, and I'm selective in my conversation. I'm only attracted to certain things anyway. I'm really attracted to change. Now, in order for you to be thought-provoking, because everybody want to be thought-provoking. You got everybody making their little YouTube video, whatever. And if you're going to be, I say, first of all, let me give you the requirements for being thought-provoking. You got to be thought-poking first. And if you're not willing to be thought-poking, you will never be thought-provoking. I can guarantee you. Nobody can ask you, oh, you can teach you. I'm like, nobody can ever teach you that. That's an experience rather, and it's a sacrifice. It's going to cost you some arguments. And if we're going to really respect what the Bible says, when it says iron sharpen irons, and everybody like the saying, but nobody really likes the science of it. When it says iron sharpens irons, that's exactly what it means. If you ever sharpen an iron, it doesn't make a good sound. It's a very nasty scratching sound that nobody can really tolerate. But boy, when it's finished, it makes both irons sharp. And so when you do understand that, it's going to cost you. You understand the difference between arguing and advocating. As a matter of fact, you can't advocate unless you know how to argue. But you have to learn how to argue first before you can ever advocate. One of my favorite movies is My Cousin Vinny. That's a very good movie. I say, but it's a very truthful logic, because it's going to come a time, and I'm going to tell you something that's in everybody's life. It's going to come a time that you have to stand up with your words. And if you're not prepared for that, that means you're not ready. And if you're not ready, you're going to miss that moment. And if you're going to miss that moment, you're going to do somebody an injustice, especially yourself. At that moment, God gave you to prepare for all your life for the conversation you're supposed to have, but you just shy away from. And so don't think every conversation you should shy away from. I think every conversation you should learn from.
You know what? I'm gonna have to disagree. I don't like saying argument. I think people who argue. What's a good term I can use?
Contrarian.
Argue with dumb facts, right? When you argue, you're arguing dumb facts. I prefer debating. Like I can see, because when you debate with logic. You're using common sense. You're getting your point across. People who argue, I think it's an emotional thing when you start arguing, right? But it's a logical thing when you debate your facts. Lightborn, and I'll tell you now, there are many times where Lightborn has come on here. We said something, and Lightborn has debated a fact, and we went back and forth, right? And so I don't consider those arguments. I consider those logical conversations, which are debates.
Well, Gene, that goes back to one of the major principles we talk about in 24/7 Dad. This idea of someone who is criticizing you versus confronting you. See, confront, and I know we that word confront is hard for people to take on, but confronting means that you have to come with facts about what you're going to say to the person, and the person gets to respond back with the facts that they feel. Criticism allows for me to say whatever I say, and I said it, it don't matter what you say. And it doesn't give the other person the opportunity to at any point have, it belittles them. It may even affect them in a way where they don't even want to respond. Like you said earlier, you see the person coming, you just be like, yeah, whatever you say.
That's the beauty of what Lightborn and Gene are saying, right? Because it's like we all have that person where when I see you, it's on, right? Like that's just what it is. When I see you, it's your ass. Like it's popping off, right? Whether it's a physical thing or argument, it's just what it is, right? You call it debate, you call it arguing. When I see you, I put my hands on you, right? And I believe that's where I'm gonna go back, emotional intelligence. Wisdom allows us to sit back and be like, am I gonna engage in this? Am I gonna repeat this habit? You know what? I do like to argue with this model. Let's get it, right? So you have the capacity to do that. As a child, you thought like a child, so you can reason, right? As an adult, you can reason both. And I think that's the beauty of growing to triple OG.
But you know what? We now, to be honest with you, and let me just put men on the carpet. I'm like, we argue all day, but we argue about things that really don't matter. And so when you arguing about the Cowboys and the Dolphins and whoever, you understand? Talking about, I'm like, and so I don't think that we really invest ourselves in arguments that we need to have versus the arguments we don't need to have.
It goes back to what Gene was talking about, focus and energy.
Right.
I don't have the energy to be arguing about some bullshit. I'm fasted. Like I ain't got the brainwave for this. Like I'll argue with you after April. But look at it right now.
Look at a $1 billion institution that's built on men arguments, and the 24-hour TV that's built on men arguing about sports, as opposed to arguing about sustainability, right, and sustenance. And so if I come, and by the time I come to you to argue about something that matters, now you don't have the capacity because you don't waste it. You understand? And something that's never, ever gonna love you or support you, that you want to give all your money to, and it's not gonna stand up for you in nowhere in life, and it may even cause your marriage, right? Sometimes. And it takes everything away from you and never give anything to you, maybe a little temporary enjoyment. And the type of faith that you give to it, you can't give to God, and we don't even do that. And so when we're talking about arguing, like, no, because back to your point, Ron, now I have to confront us on the things that we do worship and ready to go to war about that does nothing for us. You understand? And so I think it's some arguments we need to damn have to get our priorities straight.
Listen, it's funny you say, because here's a great example of that. Listen, when Jerry Jones was in that picture, right? When Jerry Jones was in that picture, you couldn't get a Cowboy fan to say anything say, oh, they made any excuse to why he was in the picture. He was a kid, he ain't know no better. But God, we had pictures like that for centuries, brother. Them pictures are the same Jim Crow pictures that we've been seeing for years. Jerry Jones, it's okay that Jerry Jones was in them, but you want to love a star so much, that star, you want to love the star, than to say Jerry Jones in that picture. You can continue to like Jerry Jones and the Cowboys after that, but just be able to have some heart to say, that's messed up that he was in the picture. Don't make an excuse for it. And I think that's what we get to. It's comfortable to say, oh, I love Jerry Jones. He's rough and tough. Oh, he get the Cowboys, blah, 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 blah. But here's an opportunity for you to talk about something that's affecting you and your children beyond the Cowboys. Because everybody, I know we had this monopoly idea that sports is our lottery ticket in life, in our community. It's a lottery ticket. We fell far away from what is really our lottery ticket. Is the actual discourse we're able to have here. To be able to debate is really a lottery ticket, because that takes education that you got to have. Not to say I take anything away from athletes, they have to do a lot of stuff, you know, run up and down, they got to exercise, they got to think good shape, whatever. But it's not the lottery ticket that we sometimes declare it to be. The lottery ticket is in our brain. Because you can get, as we understand, you can get greyhounds to run around you can get horses to run around, you can get turtles to run around the track, and people cheer for them and pay money to get it happen. But at the end of the day, them things go in the cage and people don't pay them no mind. So it'd be different when the turtle walk up there and say, well, I want y'all to recognize my strategy of being slow and consistent. And then that's when they'll walk away from the turtle and be like, we don't want to hear that. But that's what we are in the society. We're in a society. Nobody want to. Education take get a bad rap, man. Bad rap. And I probably know it better than anybody else, because people tell me you talk too much, man. You think you got to teach the world something. You is Radio Raheem and this and that and all these things. No, man, I have knowledge. And I'm not saying my knowledge is, I'm not nobody's preacher, I'm not nobody's guru, I'm not any of those things. But what I have, I need to share with you, so we all have. And that's what it's about. Because you guess what? I might think I have something, you might tell me, like Lightborn tell us a lot of times, look at another side of how we think we have something. And open up the other side of our brain. It's just we gotta keep it real.
Man, because you know, Ron, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You done?
Yeah, that was it. We just got to keep it real.
Man, I think, listening, I always feel the best, well, since we're using arguments, the best arguments that you can have are the ones that make you go back to try to prove somebody wrong. So now you got to re-educate yourself.
Absolutely.
Those are the best ones that you can have. And there are times where when that happens, you go out and find your re-education falls in line with what they were trying to teach you. So now you have to start to rethink. And I think that's when you start to truly master communication and understanding, and truly how to debate and even argue with somebody to get a point across.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no sense in, if you can't educate yourself after a conversation, there sometimes, let me not say that, because sometimes, I'll tell you now, pointless conversations are sometimes the best ones to have. Pointless arguments are the best ones to have, because it doesn't force you to think too much. It just forces you to express, and it's kind of like cathartic. But oftentimes when it comes down to starting to put emotion behind it, that's when you have to start to really think about, man, is it worth it? And is it going to make me go back and rethink or change my positioning, at least, on what we're talking about? Or is this just another conversation I'm going to have and put, waste another 30 minutes of my life? You see what I'm saying? So,
Gene, that's extremely interesting. You just said that. And I was actually contemplating on this the other day. When you think about why we sit on certain positions, right? Like, we're going to argue on something, but you're actually, what you said, you're right. And I'm sticking on my point. But the reason I'm stuck to the point, or my perspective on that viewpoint, is because I used to have a different value for something, right? Now that value no longer aligns with me, but I'm still arguing because that was like what I was used to holding true and dear, right? And when you have to sit back and kind of reevaluate your perspective or your viewpoint, there's some there's some self-discovery and there's some humility to that. Yeah, there's a whoa, my boys always walk in when I'm talking. Hold on. Apologies, gentlemen. Give me.
What's up, Mini Castro?
Hey, you know what? I remember, and I'm going to say this. That Castro just was saying, his sons always walk in, right? And I think that that's a part of what we never want to apologize. And I said that even when we used to have live groups, that wasn't something to apologize that you had to bring your kids to the group or these things had to happen. That never should. That's not something you have to apologize for, because if we lived in a time and frame where it was prehistoric time, your kids would be right there with you. You'd be dragging them along. Also, your wife would be there. Like we used to have in meetings. We used to have meetings where Travis still on here. Is Travis still
I'm
there?
right here. I'm here.
Travis was there. The kid was there. His old lady was there. And the whole, and again, it was interesting. And I'll tell you that what was so good about that time, during those times, is that his woman, his wife, would be able to hear some of the stuff and just drop a little grenade on us about something.
Mhm.
Little grenade in there, because guess what? In this time, men and fathers talking, she just threw a little bit of. But I think that she became more wiser. I would say any of the women that used to come, and because I remember I invited a couple women there sometime that they would be there. They became wiser in their relationships and everything, hearing us men and fathers talk about things that they normally had never probably heard men or fathers talk about. So it's just a very unique dynamic. So and that you had to be interrupted to change a diaper or do these things. It's not an apology. It should never be an apology, because that's our duties as fathers, to be responsible for our families and still do our work that we can do. So if I know that sometimes.
Ron,
Yes.
that's like my wife. She steps in and out and what is being said, she enjoy hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that what we are saying is true for fatherhood. So she steps in at time, and that's when she's like, "Hey, can I say something?" I've asked that a couple of times for that. But go ahead.
That curry chicken and that spaghetti was fire too.
But you know what Elder just said? What did he just explain? What his wife just said, I'm just going to translate it. Information is inspired. And so you inspired her to either want to give some information or get some, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is the difference between having a quantitative argument and a qualitative. Okay for your children to hear you. As a matter of fact, I think it's good practice for children to hear you having qualitative arguments as to quantitative arguments. When you're arguing about sports team, those are quantitative arguments. When you're arguing about money, those are quantitative arguments. But when you're arguing about substance and history and justice and love, that's a qualitative argument. And so I don't think we're going to have to start to put a line of demarcation between qualitative and quantitative arguments, because I would rather hear my kids hear me arguing about logic any day than arguing about the lust that we normally argue about the size of the booty and anatomy and other stuff like that. You understand? So I'll take a logic argument over a lust argument any day. And most people are more attracted to lust than they are about logic. This is why you can't have more of a qualitative argument than you have a quantitative.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's a really good point.
Well, that's because you got a lot of people who will discuss opinion versus discuss fact. And when you start to discuss opinions, you're never going to have quality, because you're discussing your feelings, your emotions about something versus the actual logic behind it or actual any true facts that surround any topic that you're having. And so once it becomes opinionated, you lose all quality of it and it becomes quantity.
Mhm.
Ron, that's gonna get in. I don't even want to get into the discussion, but just to talk about our imagination alone. And I think being on here, it brings something to my my imagination. It allows me to exercise my imagination in ways that I guess I wouldn't normally do by myself, right? Because the imagination of a man or a man's imagination is something, I mean, it's up to every man to describe his own imagination. But for me, I know what my imagination is in the pros, and I know what my imagination is in the con. And so for me to seek this logic that we have every Tuesday, you understand, it takes away from the lust. I'm just gonna say it for what it is, but that's the other conversation now, you know, that's gonna be a future topic. But that logic, it counters the lust that I can normally, you understand, that I've been cultivated in for so long to make sure that my mind doesn't get trapped in it. But again, that's another conversation. And again, that's the difference between having these outlets. Yes, you're gonna need to argue because you're gonna need something, and particularly being a man, you don't need something gently handed to you anyway. You know me, man, we rugged. We get it by the hand, we get it by the elbows, we get it by the sweat of the brow. But I need it, back to your point, Ron, real and raw. Mean what you say, you understand, so I can get the meaning. You understand?
Right.
And that's why it's so important. And so these conversations are they are priceless to me, because I would never be, number one, inspired enough to give the information that you guys pull out of me. That's the facts. Inspired to pull out the information. Half of this stuff, when you hear me say half of it, if not all or most of it, half of this stuff is pulled out of me during this conversation. It's nothing I sat down and wrote and said, I'm gonna say this and they say that. I'm like, no, it's just cultivated. It's like giving birth through the brain. You know, I say always women carry these babies in the stomach section and men carry these babies in their head. It's like we get the big head, but nevertheless, we get pregnant here. And so every time we have these conversations, it allows me to give birth to something, some type of information by the inspiration you guys impregnated. No pun intended.
But wait, listen, listen. I think that so much of our conversations, we have to deconstruct them for people to understand this part of why they're so important. And again, I have to say this is probably one of, and I'm out here looking for it. I'm out here looking for the thing that can compare to the type of empowerment, the type of enlightenment, the type of development, the type of just loving. And I use that word loving because for us to be here, we don't show nothing but love to one another, even in our discourse. And I use the word discourse, but the discourse is really what it is. We're having two different courses that we serving dishes on. And so when I watch the rest of the world and other content, I don't see that. I see people looking to prove that what they have is right. And it seems so ridiculous to me just as a systems person, because we understand how systems operate. Everybody in the system has their own right or wrongness. And what makes the system continue to go. So we have a great opportunity here that we're sharing with people. So again, as you watch this on a replay, share it with somebody. You know, hey, we welcome you to even come and join us if you want to, you know, get on here and challenge and question and ask questions. We welcome that, because that's the kind of the venue that this is, the kind of platform it is. It's not for the foolishness. We're not here talking about I think that nonsense that Lightborn alluded to, because we don't have time for that. We realize that time is short for our families, for us, and for our community. If we don't have time for that, we can do that. You can do that, but is that the best use of the time that we have, that we spend at least 90, 180 minutes a week. 180 minutes we spend hopefully helping each other and helping others. And so I think that's a big part of this, man. And I just again, I want to appreciate you guys, man, because the commitment of this is going back to our topic, choosing our battles. This could be a battle that you could choose that's not important to you. This could be a battle, man. It's cool, but man, I got some other things I need to be doing, battle, this and that. But I tell people all the time, especially when brothers come back and fathers come back and say, oh man, I've been away for a while. We never concerned about you being away. We're more happy when you come back. We're not concerned because we know that you're still out there. This is, like you said, Lionel, this is in your head. Fatherhood is in your head. Once you're in there, you get a piece and say, man, I wish I had time, or you don't have time. But it's in your head. And some of this is helping you maneuver through whatever you got going on. And it's not a person that's helping you. It's the aura of this think tank that we have that you can see us pouring into, that you can pour some out and help you maneuver what you need to do on a day-to-day basis.
You know, I was, you gentlemen, one thing that I never do, and I never ever want to discuss with anyone their belief systems. Because if you want to see someone get offended, talk about their belief system. And I actually got trapped into something. It was actually last week I was speaking with someone and we were talking about their belief system. And that basically what it comes down to, this person was saying that how God speaks to them and that kind of thing. And I was like, okay, I see, yeah, God speaks to everyone. You know, he talks to everybody every day. He says, he's got something to say, you know, and they were talking about how God speaks to them and these particular circumstances and what God told them to do to a person. And I'm like, really? Is that I said, that's what God says to you, that you, oh yeah, God speaks to me like that all the time. I said, well, listen, it sounds to me like it's witchcraft. Oh my goodness. That set it off right there.
Oh boy.
I thought you shy away from them kind of arguments. You really gonna run it on.
Okay, so I bowed out gracefully, and they probably will never speak to me again, but that's okay. You know, it is what it is.
Speak the truth. Speak the truth.
So those belief systems, that's one battle you don't want to pick.
Mm-hmm.
No, but you don't want that. You don't want that. And what they call infect the world. You got to remember, information, right? Either can set the world free or it can hold it captive. And so you don't want bad information out there like COVID. You understand? And so when people's going to start, particularly if people talking in a particular context, and we have a particular standard for that context, then I think my pastor used to say it best. He said, show me it in scripture. Because you can't have a perspective and it doesn't line up with any of the scripture that you're talking about, but you're saying about God, and God have his measuring tool, and nothing you said line up with his measuring tool. You understand? And so people like to go, and when it comes to, remember I told you qualitative and quantitative? People work for the quantitative. Oh, we work our ass off for the quantitative. But when it comes to the qualitative, we want it to be magical. We want it to be, what they call it? I love when people build a marriage on this crap, excuse my language. I want a fairy tale wedding. And I'm like, let me go ahead and redefine to you what a fairy tale wedding really is. Because I'm like, you obviously haven't understood what the definition of fairy tale really is. So let me explain it to you. If you look at the word fairy tale, you got two words in there, fairy and tale. And so what you want your wedding or your marriage to be is a magical lie. You understand? Magical tale lie. But then again, remember I told you about infecting the world with your information. And so guess what? We want fairy tale wedding. I'm like, okay. So when you end up in divorce, don't be mad because you asked for a magical lie. And that's what I'm saying. So what you have to do when you're talking about confronting people, back to Gene's point and everybody else point on you, is know your facts. And you got to know the facts just about from every aspect of life. So don't just study one aspect. if people are going to talk about spirituality, and I'm talking about particularly when you're talking about Christianity, people love to play these magical games because they ain't going to put in half of the work that they need to study to understand what they're talking about in the first place. And not to mention, it's allowed. It's allowed. We give licenses for people to be stupid when it comes to spirituality, and particularly into the church.
Yes,
And
yes,
people,
yes.
and I think Gary Owens said it best. He made a joke about it, but it was actually factually true what he said. He said, "Oh, you know, he's married. He used to be married to a black woman." He said we used to go to a black church, and I was like, really, it was a culture shock for him. He said because the pastor started teaching and preaching, and he said the people would stand up and they would, you know, they'd be shouting, and he was like, I didn't know it was okay to interrupt people when they were talking. You understand? And so this is the foolishness. I mean, truly, this is the foolish rituals that we deal with. And since nobody never really corrected it anyway, nobody was really in a position to learn because we were always interrupting what was being taught. And there's a lot we can talk, and trust me, we're gonna have a lot more to go on this conversation. We in these future conversations.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we got you. That's about like one of the ministers I heard I seen on TV was saying that he talks to God, and God asked him, what should he do, and he told God what he needed to do. What did God need to do? And I said, man, you're foolish, and the words coming out your mouth is foolish. And one day you're going to have to answer to those things that you said because they're untrue. God, why would God need to ask you ask you what needs to be done?
Well, Elder Thomas, I don't think he, you know, and we have to be very honest about what that person was doing. That person was telling his congregation, who has to give the tithes and the money, to you know, we do it all the time in our little settings. You know, hey man, you know, I want to get the kudos for being Playboy Bunny of the Year. So I say, you know, I seen this one, I had that one, I did this one, I did this and that. And then everybody else patting me on the shoulder. That's the same kind of mentality. You know, if I, it's no way for me to, you know, because there's another way for him to have that same power. In my opinion, there's a way for him to have that same power. To teach
That's
from the
all prosperity preaching. Ron, that is prosperity preaching, and I don't want to get off the subject, but I just want to bring that up. I understand what you're saying.
I'm not getting on the subject. I'm taking it back to the subject because he could be teaching from what he preaching. You know, he can take the text and he can educate people based on what he has interpreted in his reflection from what he read, and help them interpret and interpret for themselves based on what his reflection is. And we see that all the time in literature. We see that in movies. We see that in music. When someone creates and establishes something, then other people are able to interpret it and internalize it and then say, hey, I got something. That's what we do here. We hear each other give their points of view about whatever topic, and then they bring it inside. So there's a way to be learning and to educate, but I think sometimes people just trying to perpetrate.
But, you know, back to your point, Ron, I mean, Don, let me clear up Elder's point. Elder, there's nothing wrong with prosperity preaching. As a matter of fact, all the preaching you do is supposed to provide some type of prosperity in your life, because prosperity only means that you have growth, right? And so when we hear, you got to watch out for those type of concepts, because you hear somebody saying, labeling, stereotypes, that's exactly what it is. And so it's a stereotype that they put on the church. Oh, it's prosperity teaching. I'm like, I hope they talking prosperity teaching, because the congregation is poor as hell. And so you better be saying something to teach these poor ass people how to try to get some type of money. You understand? Not to just get money for them, but guess what? How to get money to them. So yes, poor people do need prosperity. And the thing about it is, it's the same concept they was using, and particularly they use in our culture when it comes to the really sustenance things in our life, like the men in our life. And so we get our little concepts like toxic masculinity. You understand? This is what they call it. When a man is passionate about something, all of a sudden he's toxic about it.
Yeah.
And so you
No,
get,
I never heard that.
and so the church suffers from the same thing when it comes to prosperity. I'm like, oh, whoa. I'm like, listen, doesn't sound like a bad word for me, because the world sure enough want it and got it. And because they value what it is to get ahead. God don't want you backwards, and God don't want his saints poor. So there's nothing wrong with prosperity. Now, there may be a little bit something wrong with prostituting. You understand? And our pastor was always clear about people prostituting their gifts and stuff like that.
Right,
And so
right.
when it comes to, there's
Exactly.
nothing wrong with prosperity. We got to always.
You're right. How yeah, I understand that.
Okay,
I'm
got you.
seeing it too, but I'm saying, I'll just cut off. I say I understand what you're saying, and so we can talk about it. Talk about something. Talk about it later.
Again,
We'll get it later.
You'll get it later. Yeah, we'll get it later.
yeah, I mean, again, I think that, I'm gonna say this. I think that in reference to all of this, we can break it down and deconstruct it into what we're talking about. I know that people I know in many instances people begin to make, and I think the OG, well, I call him, I ain't gonna call you all that, Larry Jordan, Brother Jordan, said that sometimes
Triple OG.
give your opinion to people, they personalize it, and then it becomes
Right.
a personal issue. It doesn't become no longer something that we can even discuss, because if it's not a discussable issue anymore. It's personal. They have a direct relation to it that it can't even be discussed. It's their total belief system. And sometimes it's great. I agree that it's your belief system, but even in your belief system, you have to be able to discuss what you believe. Because how do you validate if you're not willing to discuss it? It's what I believe. I believe that I'm the king of the world. No, what I believe is I'm about to get Baker acted and put into the asylum, because I have no proof to prove that I'm the king of any world or anything. I might be the king of my own world, but in this world right here, I'm just a humble servant of the streets.
But that goes back to what I was saying earlier with Gene, was how we have to be able to be willing to reevaluate our own positioning, our own previous argument. If we're getting into an argument and you make a point that negates or makes me question my values of why I'm arguing for this, am I willing to revisit and recontemplate what I was upbringing that brought me to this viewpoint, right?
Yeah.
I don't think as men, maybe the men in this room, we have enough value within ourselves and integrity that we're able to go back and unpack that and be okay with that. I don't think most men are able to do that, or are even willing to contemplate or argue what their mama taught them or what their daddy taught them, or even question that there's another way of operating outside of that. And I believe that cripples a lot of us. We're not willing to learn or grow, right? Somebody said growth. That's part of the process. I could be fishing here, but from my perspective, I think it's our ability to be willing to learn and grow and understand that there's a different perspective and there's a different viewpoint. And
I totally agree with that.
All right.
Oh, go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. I was gonna say, with that whole thing, and I know you guys want to change stuff, but I think with those terms, right, with the prosperity preaching and things like that, I think it's your audience also, because I can sit there and tell anyone, like Ron's example, look, man, I'm king of the world. If I got enough people backing me up and saying, well, because he said he's king of the world, he's king of the world, then my audience is going to make me, because I chose that audience to back me up, my fairy tale, like what we're saying, now becomes fact. Because now 10 people are saying what I said, and they're backing it up. And so I think when we look at these people who are in these positions, and they have even these congregations backing them up, and then you start to say, yo, that's prosperity preaching. You got to remember, Proverbs teaches prosperity. There's a whole book in the Bible that teaches you not to be poor. And so you've got to, we have got to look at things, put them in perspective, choose who, choose who we're going to have these battles with, because some of them, you can't fight the person and their flock. Sometimes you just got to drop a nugget and hopefully it sinks into somebody in that flock to make them think twice, and you just walk away.
I agree with you, Dean. I agree with everything you said.
Yeah. So it's like, and I know I use that example, but I'm using that example throughout everything, because even look at when you're in meetings, right? You're at your job and you're at a meeting and someone says something, and no matter how dumb it is, everyone else is like, yeah, you know what? I didn't think about that. And you're sitting there saying, yo, this dude's saying some ignorant stuff, man. But you're the only one who has something to say that contradicts what the flock is saying. And when you say it, you're just like, you know what? I'll just have to just leave it. I'll say it and leave it, and hopefully it sinks in. And that's sometimes how you pick and choose your battles. It doesn't have to be you going back and forth. It could just be you dropping a little bit of knowledge, backing up. And if it sinks into somebody, they're going to come by you and be like, hey, explain to me what you were trying to say. And then that's when you get into the re-education piece of what it is that's going on.
I think that especially when it comes to prosperity, because you're right, the word does talk about prosperity. In fact, Jesus talked about money more than he talked about anything else. But it also depends on results. And what I mean by that is, if I'm following Creflo Dollar, okay, and Creflo Dollar tells me something and I do it, and I look in the word and it's verified in the word and I do it, and all of a sudden I'm better for it. Whether it's in my health, whether it's in my wealth, whether it's in my relationships, whether it's in my emotional being, if I'm better for that, then that's prosperity, and it works, and it's working. So I think a lot of times where I think a lot of these con artists comes in, they send a bunch of stuff, you need to make a vow, but you ain't getting no results. And that's the problem. Now you just stealing right now. That's really the bottom line. So as long as I'm seeing results, like I said, he could get his $60 million plane. That doesn't bother me. Okay, at all, because no one says anything with the IBM man riding in a $60 million plane, when they, Bezos and the rest of, because they've earned it. They've made a system that works, and they're being rewarded for that. Now, I think that same thing should apply to the man of God. If God has given him a system that he's given to you that works in your life, as a result, he should be rewarded. And I don't have a problem with it.
Got an amen on that, because I actually gave to that plane.
Me too.
I did. I gave to it. Hey, when I think about it, and just to clear things up, just in case for the people who didn't see the video, I gave to it and God didn't even use it. Hey, he didn't even use my donation. Y'all remember how he got that plane, right? Just to clear that up. One guy bought that plane. One guy.
Yeah.
An Arabic guy. Yeah, one guy bought that plane. And then it dawned on, like, you know what? That when they say you have not because you ask not, that's when that scripture became very clear to me. I'm like, wow. One guy, God said, I will never make a man of God a liar. Not a real man of God. One dude bought that plane.
Wow. I think I'm gonna ask.
Did he send back your money?
Huh?
Hey, I don't want it back, because I can't wait to see the tree it grow into.
They say plant it in and put that seed in the ground.
Plant a seed, that little mustard seed.
Plant the seed. I'm sorry, take guys off of all that was,
Not Elder Thomas. You didn't take us off subject. Just right into what we're talking about.
In
your back.
Right.
And again,
all right, Ron.
Again, I know you coming. I hear you tapping on the door. again, these conversations, listen, I think that Elder Thomas, and I think that for anybody and everybody in the group, listen, when we're talking about something, our brains is opening up. And some
Right.
other things is gonna want to come out. And so the idea to shut those things down, and I'm very adamant about that, is let's don't shut it down. Let's see how this relates to what we're talking about, because every conversation of intellect relates to one another. It's the ignorant conversations that can't relate. You can't build it in. We can build in any kind of intellectual conversation into something, you know. So I say that, and I say if you're watching this, I know that you probably saying, "Wow, these guys on here, man." This and again, it is what it is. We just tell them like it is. There's no scripts, no get together, have a pre-show. We come here with a topic and talk about it based on our experiences as men and as fathers and as servants of our community. And I think that's a big part of this, is that we and this is all done with no, listen, let me say this. This is all done. This is important for people to, and I like to share this all the time. This is completely done with no financial backing from anywhere. This just a bunch of guys getting together on Zoom and then go to YouTube. We don't ask for cash, that we don't ask for nothing. We don't want none of that. We just want to have this opportunity, because as much as we sharing the content with you, also using the content for ourselves and for our daily sanity as fathers in this world. And with that being said, Father, repeat after me. I am.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am a man of honor.
I am a man of honor.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I'm a man of courage.
I am a man of courage.
I say, Father, I am.
I
I
am.
am.
I am.
I'm a man of respect.
I am a
I
man
am a man of
of
respect.
Father, I say, I am.
I am.
You are.
You
are.
We are.
We are.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh my.
Great conversation.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
love you guys.
You can join us tomorrow night. You can look in the chat. Thanks for watching it. You can look in the chat and see how to get on the Zoom for tomorrow night. We'll be having a conversation. The conversation will be communication, because this is what we were talking about tonight, communication. All right. Other than that, hey, thank you for joining us tonight, and good night.
Good night, all.